everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the absolute most fascinating corporate journeys in modern history. We're going to break down how a company's greatest triumph, the seemingly impossible task of organizing all the world's information, somehow morphed into its biggest, most existential legal threat. It's a wild story about innovation, unparalleled growth, and what happens when you simply win a little too well. Let's get right into it.
Section 1, the trust paradox.
I want you to think about the sheer scale of that little white search box we all use. Every single day, over 5 billion people type a question into it. Think about that for a second. We trust it implicitly. Honestly, we often trust it more than our doctors for medical symptoms or the news for current events. We literally rely on it more than our own memories. And that box, of course, is Google. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the jarring contrast between our everyday, unquestioning trust and this shocking reality check from August 2024. A federal judge, Amit Mehta, looked at that exact same ubiquitous white box and delivered a ruling nobody quite expected. He stated flat out, Google is a monopolist, and it has acted as one. It is a stunning, sobering reality check for a company that started out as just two broke students with a big idea.
Section 2, the accidental empire. To really understand how we got to that 2024 courtroom, we actually have to rewind all the way back to Stanford University in 1995. Sergey Brin and Larry Page were two students who basically disagreed on almost everything. But, that friction led to a pretty wild idea. They wondered, could you rank web pages not by counting how many times a keyword appears, but by analyzing who actually links to them? It's kind of like counting votes for credibility. They called this early, super clunky system BackRub, and it was so incredibly resource-intensive it nearly broke Stanford's entire computer network. Realizing they had something massive on their hands, they renamed it Google, which is a play on the mathematical term Google, meaning a 1 followed by 100 zeros. In September 1998, they officially moved into a Menlo Park garage rented from their colleague Susan Wojcicki, and the whole shebang was officially born. Fast forward a bit to 1999, and they were already processing 500,000 searches a day. Investors were definitely circling, but there was a catch. They desperately needed a way to actually make money. Entered this incredibly pivotal moment in the year 2000, the launch of AdWords. See, instead of forcing companies to pay for those annoying banner ads that nobody ever clicked, Google introduced a brilliantly simple idea. Advertisers would pay only when someone actually clicked their link. That single elegant solution became one of the absolute most profitable inventions in business history, serving as the financial engine for the entire company for the next 2 decades. So to manage this truly explosive growth, they brought in Eric Schmidt as CEO in 2001. This created a rather unique 3-headed animal leadership structure. Schmidt ran the business, Page focused on products, and Brin handled the technology. And man, did this trio stun Wall Street in August 2004 with their initial public offering. They raised $1.67 billion, but they completely did it their own way. They used a very unconventional auction-style pricing system and famously included a founder's letter that explicitly warned investors not to expect a conventional company, which is kind of an ironic warning today given the totally conventional antitrust battles that would eventually follow. Section 3, buying the future. Let's move to and see how this builds into an even bigger picture. With a massive influx of cash from the IPO, Google rapidly transformed into an unstoppable empire by effectively buying up the map of the internet's future. Just look at this aggressive timeline. In 2005, they bought a tiny mobile software startup called Android for a reported $50 million. Then in 2006, they paid what many critics at the time called an outrageously overpriced $1.65 billion for a 2-year-old video site you might have heard of named YouTube. And in 2007, they acquired DoubleClick, cementing their total grip on online advertising infrastructure. Through these rapid-fire acquisitions, Google quietly but very decisively cornered the upcoming eras of mobile, video, and online advertising. Well, as the company grew to this monstrous size, its structure had to evolve. Larry Page eventually returned as CEO, and then in 2015, they executed a massive restructuring. They essentially created a new parent company called Alphabet. This allowed them to house all their super ambitious moonshots, like self-driving cars and life sciences, under the Alphabet umbrella, while the core search and advertising business remained strictly as Google. At that point, Sundar Pichai, the quiet engineer who had helped build the wildly successful Chrome browser, was handed the keys to run Google itself. And under Pichai, they expanded to a staggering 90% dominance in global search share.
9-0. But, as you can probably guess, when one single company controls 90% of the world's queries, a really uncomfortable question naturally pops up for governments worldwide. Is this still free market competition, or has this just become absolute control? Okay, let's dive into this next part. Section 4, the monopoly trap. Because this right here is the exact pivot point where Google made a fatal, historic mistake. And surprisingly enough, it wasn't a product failure at all. Google didn't have to build a bad product to get into trouble. Their search engine was genuinely, demonstrably better than the competition. But instead of just letting that superior product speak for itself in winning purely on merit, Google quietly spent billions of dollars every single year paying hardware giants like Apple and Samsung. Why? To lock in default placement on all their devices. They essentially paid a massive premium to ensure you, the user, never even saw a choice screen to pick a rival search engine. And that specific strategy directly led to this breaking point. In 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice filed a historic antitrust lawsuit focused precisely on those billions spent locking in defaults. This whole thing culminated in a massive Washington trial that dragged across 2023 and 2024. During this trial, CEO Sundar Pichai himself actually had to take the stand, and he admitted just how critically important those default placement deals really were to maintaining Google's dominance. The verdict? An absolute gut punch. In August 2024, Google was officially ruled a monopolist. This was a huge deal. It was the first major tech antitrust defeat in over 20 years, and it sent shockwaves straight through Silicon Valley. But the ruling was just the beginning. Prosecutors came back demanding an unthinkable penalty. They literally wanted to force Google to sell off its Chrome browser. We're talking about a vital asset that was powering nearly 40% of its search traffic. For a minute there, the empire looked like it might actually be broken apart. Section 5, the AI rebirth. So, just as the tech giant faced its ultimate reckoning, instead of retreating, Google prepared for its next evolution. In September 2025, the highly anticipated ruling on penalties finally came down. The result? Google was not forced to sell Chrome. They were ordered to loosen those exclusive default deals and share limited search data, but the core of the empire actually survived completely intact. The market reacted instantly to the relief. Alphabet stock jumped 8% in a single afternoon. Amazingly, this financial optimism held true even as they faced a completely separate ruling, finding them guilty of illegally dominating ad tech, and European regulators slapped them with an additional $3.5 billion fine. The legal hits kept coming, for sure, but the foundation held strong. Unfazed by all these ongoing regulatory storms, Google simply rushed right to the next battlefield. They pivoted incredibly hard into artificial intelligence. Their Gemini AI models were quickly and seamlessly folded directly into the core search experience you use every day. At the same time, their cloud computing revenue absolutely exploded, as businesses everywhere eagerly lined up to rent Google's massive AI infrastructure to power their own tools. So, the crucial point is the result of all this chaos. Despite years of intense, globe-spanning legal fights over its power, by early 2026, Alphabet's annual revenue crossed $400 billion for the first time in the company's entire history. The legal label of monopolist stuck, but financially, the machine was printing money faster than ever before. You know, Google's story is not a warning about building a bad product. Not at all. It is a really profound lesson about what happens after you win. They nearly fell because unchecked dominance inevitably invites a massive reckoning. Those two college students who set out simply to organize the world's information eventually needed a federal judge to remind them that information should remain accessible, not heavily guarded behind paid defaults. And as we look at all the incredible tools they continue to build today, it leaves us with this pretty provocative question to take away. Should the world's information truly be accessible to everyone on a level playing field? Or is it just inevitable that it becomes owned and controlled by the one who organizes it best? It's a tension we all participate in every single time we type into that little white box. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.